Alright everyone, we start off today with one hell of a living nightmare for the Democratic Party because Rashida Tlaib exists. They're having a problem. It's not just Tlaib, it's also Elon Omar, AOC, a few others. Basically the Geek Squad, formerly the Gang of Four, Ayanna Pressley. People who are entirely self-serving and swept into the Democratic Party over the last few cycles by looking at areas that were far blue, so they're solidly Democrat, but they were represented by neoliberals. And here's the disconnect between the national level party and local and state politics. The Republicans suffer with this too, of course. The kind of thing that you have to say in order to get elected in a swing district or a swing state is not necessarily the same as somebody who is in a district that is massively politically lopsided. In those cases, the left correctly gauged that they could pick off seats held by older neoliberals by fielding generally younger DEI candidates, and that's indeed, there's not a whole lot of diversity in the Geek Squad. The only diversity is the complete absence of white males, and mainly white females as well. It's grievance politics based, and it's becoming a headache for the party because if you're trying to target a state like Pennsylvania, it's not going to be the same as the kind of platform that's going to go well in AOC's district or in Dearborn. Rashida Tlaib knows her crowd. She understands her constituents, and fundamentally, by the way, Rashida Tlaib is doing what is right by saying this sort of thing, considering that it does represent the wills of the people who voted for her. That's literally the purpose of a member of Congress. So you're going to get somebody from an urban, far blue district. They're going to sound drastically different, assuming that they're representing the will of the constituents that voted for them, than somebody who comes from a very rural area, very conservative, maybe very religious. There's going to be a differentiation. The irony is that technically she's being less sleazy than the Democratic Party at the national level. Well, that's a real big problem for them. The problem is that in the modern age of information, what would have stayed generally local before, like you have somebody represents a congressional district that is overwhelmingly Polish immigrants. And so they cater to them, and they talk about how great Krakow is this time of year, or something like that. They play it up for an ethnic reason or religious reason. Somebody represents an area where it's very, very religious. They're going to be different. It's only scandalous when you apply it to a national party and then expose it as something to be critiqued to the national public, which largely won't agree with it, because those hardliners, while they're representing the views of their constituents, are outside of the mean, median, and mode, nationally speaking. So now, Rashida Tlaib has made a big headache for the Democrats once again, because she's at latitude to come out and say, oh, free Gaza, and Israel should be condemned, the international court should slap cuffs on Netanyahu. Her constituents agree with her. Fundamentally, she's doing her job. That's the irony. The Democrats, though, have a big problem because they've allowed these people to seep into the Democratic Party, and before they were controlling them. So they would sprinkle a few tidbits here and there about wokeness and how much they love diversity, even though the Democrats are, about as diverse as the Ku Klux Klan ever was. And then they would forget about them after election season. They wouldn't give them really anything meaningful. Little welfare here to keep you quiet. A little bit of DEI here to keep you quiet. Biden puts in a running mate who happens to be a black female and then gets gay Dracula to be transport secretary, and this is diversity neoliberal style. Rashida Tlaib does represent her district properly. Fundamentally, she's right. That's the tragic irony of it. I'm not talking about whether her message is right. I'm saying for her constituents in their general aggregated beliefs, because she represents a lopsidedly, massively leftoid district, technically it's her, not the Democratic Party at large, that represents the views of the people she needs to vote for. She'll have her job as long as she wants. The neoliberals are not going to be able to condemn her out of office or anything like that. Although the Republicans and the neoliberals would really like to curb stomp the leftoids out of existence for various reasons because they're such a political headache, they also don't really want to do that because if you were to eliminate the leftoids from the Democratic Party, it would begin to look awfully old, white, and male now, wouldn't it? well, if you're going to be the woke party and promise things to people and you start kicking out your own candidates based on that sort of difference, largely you'd be unsuccessful even trying, what you're going to end up with is a rebellion within your political party. Now, there's a doppelganger on the Republican side. You have the MAGA populists slash vaguely libertarian individuals, and then you have the hegemon of the uniparty neocon old guard, the Bushes and the McConnells and the McCains of the party, the Romneys and Cornynes and so forth. And they spar too. But it is nowhere near as out of hand. Supposedly the Republicans are a party in disarray, and Republicans are very, very good at losing with grace, and they're very, very good at stealing defeat from the jaws of victory. This sort of thing is a much bigger problem. This is a polarizing issue, but the majority of Americans do not support Palestine. Just to be clear, I'm not Team Israel or Team Palestine, I'm just Team America First. But the majority of people, when really pressed, they side with Israel. That's just the long and fucking short of it. Outside of these few very blue voters. Tlaib is their darling, along with AOC and Omar and the others. The national level Democrats appear not to understand this. They think that they're going to be able to come in with a neoliberal wedge into an area that's like 80% partisan, where the Republicans sometimes don't even really bother to field a candidate, and manage to knock out someone who fundamentally is playing it up to their base properly and technically doing their job. It's like the only job, for example, of Peter Welch from here in Vermont, he's the representative from our state, is to represent the constituencies, the constituency within the state of Vermont. That means 70% Democrats, and many of them on the left, the progressives. I'm surprised that they haven't knocked him off, by the way. It would be easy to do. The Progressive Caucus already holds a supermajority in the House and the Senate. It's impossible for Phil Scott to stop them in any of their overly socialistic proceedings. Why haven't the like post-Occupy nouveau left Dems knocked off Peter Welch? He's fundamentally a neoliberal. He tries to keep a low profile. I think he's vulnerable, actually. I'm surprised that they haven't fielded a primary challenger against him. I guess they decided it wasn't too important because we're the state of Vermont. But it is a far blue state. Fundamentally, if he's being liberal and or left, he's representing the constituents of the state. I'm not his constituent. I didn't vote for him. I don't represent the majority will of the state. For a member of Congress, that's their job, to represent the will of the people there. But it's a huge headache when you try to extrapolate it to a national platform. You can either devolve and act more locally and state level, like the Republicans wisely are choosing to do, or you can try to hold together this really top-heavy system in which you've got an increasing minority of voters within your party that totally deviate from anything that would be palatable in the average part of the country. The Democrats are at a loss of how to actually navigate the Scylla and Charybdis, which is national politics, in the digital area. It's no longer that it's carried by the local news story or on the local or regional TV channel. It's instantaneously spread nationwide and indeed even internationally. People who aren't even in the United States regularly and routinely weigh in on U.S. politics and political figures. And that really, it nudges the conversation now, doesn't it? You've got influencers in other countries with millions of American fans. There is some degree of latitude there to put out their opinions, and this is something that really wasn't a thing up until the last couple of election cycles. Even if you go back as recently as 2008, the internet and social media and stuff didn't play nearly as prominent a role as it does now. A significant proportion of people don't even get their news from the television or the radio or anything like that. They've canceled their newspaper subscriptions, and they watch a YouTuber or a TikToker or something like that, or follow an Instagram reel. And that's the long and short of it. Tlaib and Omar and the others are hip to that. The old neoliberals don't understand that at all. That's about all. Peace out.